I'm happy to announce that Rebooted, Book 1 in this 4-book series, is out on Amazon as an ebook with the physical copy pending my review of the author proof, which is still in the mail. In fact, why don't I tell you a little bit about what's in the book? So this is Book 1 in a 3-part series, technically 4. Book 1, Rebooted, is about the corporate side of Warner Brothers and DC, stretching back all the way back to the 1930s, back when Superman was first invented by 2 kids who just wanted to tell cool stories. We get into how DC Comics screwed them out of the money they were owed for Superman, and how when they tried to recoup the cost by pitching the character of Superboy, they hoped that World War II and the Nazis would kill Jerry and Joe so they wouldn't have to pay them for that character either, and started releasing Superboy comics behind their backs while they were on the front lines. Then we flash forward what happened to George Reeve, then Christopher Reeve and Richard Donner, Margot Kidder. Then we go into Tim Burton, we go into Joel Schumacher, then we start hitting the DCEU. It is a chronicle of the repeating issues within Warner Brothers, DC, and Hollywood at large. So, what are you going to get in the book? Well, a preface that'll kind of say what I just said, but in different words. It'll explain what you're in for and the themes of what you're about to read. Then you'll get into the Warner Boros effect, which is, like I said before, repeating cycles like an Ouroboros within Warner Brothers, the company, going back to nearly 100 years of scandal and abuse. It is intense, and in fact, there's even more stuff that will probably come out after this, because it seems like that is a sinking ship. It's going to talk about everything from DC Comics to Warner Brothers, stretching back 100 years. Then you've got the Ayer cut, which is going to have concept art. It'll have script excerpts from the Ayer cut. It'll tell you what the original cut did differently, why it was ultimately not what we got, and what you can do to potentially see the movie for real outside of, visiting David Ayer's house, which would be cool, but I don't think it's viable for everyone. And what type of danger this precedent sets for other movies, like, say, your Batgirls or your Coyotes versus Acme. That could be a real issue, and it is an issue. And it's not just at Warner Brothers, it's actually at a lot of different studios. So we get into that. We get into the composing, the editing, the story, the cast, the ideas, people who were almost cast in certain roles before, the Steppenwolf angle that was originally pitched for the movie, all of it. And it is one of the few chapters I can say that I don't think anyone has ever cataloged all of this information. I mean, not just in a few places, but at all, because it's not just interviews, it's not just articles. It's also scrolling a gajillion social media interactions that David Ayer has had over the last 8 years talking about this movie. No one has the data that we have, except for people who worked on the movie themselves, and they aren't writing books about it, so we did. Then we've got the Tower of Babel. This is a chapter that will dive into the breakdown in communication between fans and the media they claim to be watching and engaging with, oftentimes not engaging at all, and how that breakdown in connection means that the studios are getting knee-jerk reactions to art that people weren't really engaging with to begin with. You can't say that Superman was a mass murderer in Man of Steel and they need to ooh-wooify him to death when he wasn't a mass murderer. You're getting false criticisms about art from people who weren't engaging with it. In that breakdown, we talk about a very prolific YouTuber who decided to mock Adam Snyder in his critique of Batman vs. Superman. We talk about why someone would do that, the mentality that goes into it, sort of a psychological analysis. And we get into conversations about what David Ayer and a Twitter user coined as quantum discussions, and my extrapolation of that as a quantum opinion. So you'll have to read that chapter for more on that. Then there's a really fun chapter called The Cult Before Snyder, and it is an examination of what happens when a studio listens to a fandom, in this case Paramount, trying to cancel a show and then trying to cancel it a second time, there being a drought of content for 10 years, and then movies, and now it's a media empire. You may know it, it's called Star Trek. So we talk about the Trimbles who saved that, the fan campaign, the picketing, the phone calls, the fan mail that ground CBS to a standstill. The way that fandom was perceived at the time, we compare it and contrast it with fandoms like the Snyder fandom, general DC fandom, Saving the Expanse, Firefly, things of that nature. And we look at how you can see a divergence where egos are put aside and the corporation listens to the fan feedback. It's not just, oh, someone claims that there's 50 people who want this. It's actual measurable fan turnout. And you listen to that and you offer, okay, for what you're offering, ticket sales wise, we can make something for you if you show up. And then they show up. And so instead of getting petty, they don't just keep canceling it, they start iterating on it. And now we've got Picard and Janeway and all those other captains and stories, and Star Trek is still huge to this day. So that's a really fun one because it's got a positive story to it. A lot of this kind of uncovers corruption, and this still has drama, but it has a happy ending because the fandom and the corporation found a way to work together and be mutually beneficial. And it's something that, Warner Brothers and other corporations could stand to look at. Then we have Truth, Justice, and the American Way. This, unlike the Warner Bros., which is about the repeating cycles, the things that keep happening, this is far more specifically focused primarily on the DCEU. We look at the chief creative people involved in the downfall from 2013 to all the way up to The Flash. It's going to look at your Walter Hamadas, your Kevin Tsuchiharas. We have a little bit on James Gunn and Peter Safran, but you know what? I'll just let you guys find out how that little bit goes. I'm sure I'm going to get some feedback on that one. And we start off with, obviously, Joss Whedon, and we talk about how no one at the time could have guessed that Joss was in the mental state he was in, that Age of Ultron being lambasted by critics and fans had soured him to the degree that it had, and that he was going to go on such a deranged warpath. And so, we look at things like the official documentation from the federal court judge that investigated Ray Fisher's case versus what Warner Brothers' official statement was. We actually have her on record, literally her voice talking about this stuff.
A very time-consuming process, and I know this has not been an easy one by any means. And if ever there were any points in time where I seemed defensive or please.
You've been a gentleman. You've been a gentleman, and I'll say you've been a man of your word. And that is what we have reported to the company, which is that you told us you would give us names, you gave us names. You told us you would meet with us on a particular day at a particular time. You never tried to reschedule it. You met us. You even gave us information after that. You've been a man of your word. You are someone that we have found extremely credible. And the fact that you risked so much is part of what lends itself to your credibility. But just also, the facts speak for themselves.
So we have evidence that there were cover-ups. We expose all that. We look at the fact that the whole real DC fans versus Snyder cult dichotomy, it was literally just some fans were like, hey, this movie wasn't what you said it would be. And you've done this twice now with Suicide Squad and Justice League. We're just kind of confused. What's going on? Are there good movies you're hiding from us? There seems to be abuse on set as well. What's up with that? Why aren't you guys doing anything? And so fans started looking into it, and they accidentally kind of stumbled into a bunch of non-superhero related closet full of skeletons that Warner Brothers had, far reaching beyond just DC. And because that threatened a bunch of executives' jobs during a merger with AT&T, the smear campaign started. The fake Frosty the Snowman thing, lies about Ray Fisher, and the Snyder cult. So we dive into that, and it's juicy. Then we have Something Rotten, a chapter that looks at score aggregate websites like Metacritic, IMDb, Letterboxd, and more specifically, you've got yourself Rotten Tomatoes. We look at the exchange of leadership, where it used to be majority sharehold by Warner Brothers, and then 2 weeks before Batman vs. Superman comes out, it gets moved to Universal. We look at the way it aggregates scores incorrectly. It's not even no one does it this way. It's incredibly broken. Even other critics don't like it. We look at the way that these critics behave, the way they conduct themselves in their reviews, and how they're usually not engaging with the art. They're engaging with their opinion about how the art should have replicated their childhood or their fan fiction. And then we take a walk down memory lane. We look at some art that was negatively reviewed in the past but is beloved now. And we look at the way the critics have just engaged with things in the past and the true job of a critic. And it's going to sound like it's very anti-criticism. In reality, it's really just a call for the lowest common denominator to step their game up. And for the people who do their jobs well, of which there are many, to step up and lead the charge to be better. I don't think, it's in the chapter, but only 10% of people who go to see movies or watch TV shows leave a review on a website. So we're getting really, really bad feedback from 10% of very vocal people. Regular people don't do that. They turn it on and then they turn it off. And that's it. And they might talk about it at work, or they might talk about it with a loved one, but they don't go online and they don't leave a review. So, we're gonna look at the mistakes in this, the way the corporations are obsessed with something that has never meant financial return, all kinds of stuff. And it's really more of a wider Hollywood issue. Then there's a little chapter that kind of ties things up, the themes, recounts some of the stuff, puts it all in a nice bow for you to recap. And then there's a preview of the chapter Botman v Superfan, which uncovers again, this is something where we can only present the data and you have to draw your own conclusion. Were these reporters like Humberto Gonzalez and Tatiana Siegel, were they intentionally falsifying data? Were they intentionally lying? Were they doing it because they thought it would be funny? Did they have a vendetta? Were they being told to do it by a corporation? Or are they just so incompetent that they don't know the truth from their own asshole? Genuinely, we don't know. I mean, we can draw conclusions, we can make assumptions, but we won't, we can't hook them into a polygraph and get that information. Although when confronted with the faults within the reporting, the reports stayed up even after they acknowledged them. And we have some comments from their peers about how they're seen within the industry, not just in like the superhero and entertainment industries, but just with journalism, like political, sports, the whole shebang. Just these people do not have high standing in those circles. So that's a little preview. And then we have an art gallery. Again, this was originally one huge book that collected the corporate side of things, the comic accuracy side of things, and then the fandom side of things, the truth behind all the false narratives, these fake accounts, behaviors that have gone unreported on. But it was huge, and there was really no way to make the book cheaper. And on top of that, the art we were putting in it, because we had art for each chapter, like a poster, it was ballooning the file size, because we have screenshots of social media interactions, of movie review headlines and stuff. We know that things get deleted, so we have to have proof. So we have names, we have dates, and in many cases we have screenshots, we have photo evidence. We want this to be as bulletproof as we can make it possibly, which meant that the file sizes for both e-publishing and paperback, they were kind of ballooning. Unless you're making a textbook, people don't usually expect this much text and this much, file for like JPEGs, PNGs, what have you. So we had to cut a lot of things. And also creatively, we just changed gears of what this book would look like throughout the time. But instead of letting that all go to waste, we have repurposed that art, and it now is in an art gallery at the end of the book, so you can look at it, different chapter designs, different book titles, things of that nature, because unlike Warner Brothers, we don't lock our creative ideas in a vault for a tax write-off. We believe in letting it shine. And in fact, we repurposed some of these pieces of art from like the very first draft of the book to the Suicide Squad tabletop game, which had to be pushed back a little bit in order to make sure that this book was out on time, at least as an ebook before Halloween. Again, paperback, we just have to make sure that the print quality for the cover and the formatting was all A-okay before it goes to publicly available. So that should be within the next week or two if we're staying on track. And the tabletop game shouldn't be too far beyond that. But in some of the mission levels, we have them up as posters and condoc for Task Force X Operation Kingbreaker, which is a tabletop game that is not just AIR, not just gun, not just comic, not just animation. It's an amalgamation. It's meant to be fun. You can rebrand it, retake it, make your own version of these characters, and just have fun. It's really just meant from DC fans to DC fans, a way to celebrate and have fun, whether you like Henry Cavill or Brandon Routh or Tyler Hoechlin or Christopher Reeve or Tim Daly, George Newbern, whoever, Nicolas Cage, whatever your Superman is, you can just play and have fun. And it's kind of to help remind everyone that we have a lot of fun together when we stop coming up with reasons to not get along. So, kind of meant to breed a little bit of jolly cooperation. And this is book one, like I said in the beginning. Book two is going to be about comic accuracy. So it's going to be looking about what that means, the writing process of even making a comic, from script work to pencils, inks, letterers, the copyright getting approved, editorial, the due dates of everything. And we go into some stories, like the way that the death of Superman resulted in the authors being chased out of like shopping malls by angry fans, and they received death threats, as did Richard Donner, which is covered in this first book, actually, during the, I believe the Warner Boros chapter is that one. And the way that people just negatively responded, the way that we're kind of, people say comic accuracy and they just mean, I prefer this character to behave this way. And I associate that with the things that I love about this medium, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way they've been depicted, but I want to pretend that it is. Selective memory, So we dive into that. We dive into the divergent continuities. We look specifically at DCEU stuff, but also at other continuities, different depictions, Tim Burton, Christopher Reeve. Obviously, the roofie kiss and Great Wall of China repairing Vision is not normally part of Superman's repertoire of superpowers. So we go into that, and it's just kind of, if you're tired of people complaining that this isn't canon, you can't do that, this is kind of the chapter for you. And thanks to Alan Moore and Frank Miller's most recent articles that they've been part of for Inverse and The Guardian, we actually have more things to add, which has been a big issue with these books. The first draft of the entire book, 500 pages, was ready by Christmas of last year. But a lot of the editorial team was burned out. A lot of the research team was burned out because the things we uncovered were so depressing and dramatic and dour that they had to tap out eventually, which meant that I am now the person bringing all of the work of all these people to the finish line. In fact, they were so terrified that they don't even want their names on this, because most of the people who agreed to help because they'd been targeted in the past. This all really started about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, when a bunch of people were being threatened. They had their personal information leaked. They had their identities impersonated on different social media platforms. They had phone calls, emails at their places of work or at home. People had their significant others harassed for just being associated with the people who maybe gave a movie 5 stars out of 5 instead of 3 stars like these people believed they should have. And, that's a big weight. And a lot of them are also very creative, talented people. And they've gone on to go focus their time and energy, the limited time we all have on these planets that we call home, whether you be here or secretly a Martian among us. They wanted to go do their own thing, and something that wasn't quite so heavy, which has left me to finish this. And I'm a marketing and advertising guy. That's what I went to college for. That was my major. So for me, I have insights on the business side of things, sure, and advertising and different methodologies that have yielded success and things that they literally teach you as a freshman all the way to your 4th year about what you should and shouldn't do within these industries, and the way those industries are always changing, and yet how the studios seem to ignore that and just do whatever the fuck they want. But as a writer, I'm sure you'll find issues, commas where they shouldn't be, or one where they should have been, too short of a sentence, too long. But this isn't a college paper. It's a book, and frankly, the contents, the story, the information is what matters far more than if you think that I should take another semester of writing, because I never intended to become a journalist. It's just kind of what I've turned into. If you've been on this channel for long, that's kind of what I've turned into, unfortunately. I mean, I enjoy it, but at the same time, I wish someone else was doing it instead of me. But yeah, and then book 3 will be about the fandom stuff, as you've probably seen on this channel, the fake people pretending to be a fan so they can get the blowback effect, a technique used by the CIA, actually, which, being former military, I talk about the psyops, the manipulation of a target demographic, and the way that this is actually mirroring the behaviors of counterinsurgency techniques, which, I'm sure if you asked Tom King about that, he'd have a smile on his face while he talked about all the people he tortured or something. At least that's what he did to Frank Miller. So that's going to be the book 1, 2, and 3, rebooted corporate side. Then we've got the comic accuracy side. Then we've got the fandom side. And then we've got book 4, which collects all of that. And that's going to be the way it is. I don't have any plans to release a hardcover version of these books, just ebook and paperback, because the whole point is it's supposed to be kind of more affordable. Something where if you have a specific vertical slice of this topic you're interested in, you can hop into it at the lowest possible cost point, because the different platforms only allow me to control the price so much. They set goalposts, and I can exist within those 2 points. So just there's a certain amount of web hosting or printing and shipping that I can't cut that cost out. But if I make the book smaller, then it becomes cheaper. So that allows you guys can pick it up, if you're specifically interested in these things, or if you know someone who's kind of interested who you think might benefit from learning a little bit more or have fun learning about more, you can give them these specific books, and then if they find more interest, they can buy the other books or wait for the final book to come out that collects all of it. And that's what this is. It's literally just a bunch of fans realizing what's going on with DC, realizing that what happened to Zack Snyder was done to Tim Burton and Richard Donner, and it's going to be done to James Gunn the same way it was done to James Wan and Patty Jenkins and David Ayer and David F. Sandberg and Dwayne Johnson. It's a revolving door. And I'm not doing this because I expect that if I publish this book, everyone will agree with me magically and suddenly love the movies I love and dislike the movies I dislike. And Zach will ride in on a white horse or a unicorn, and he'll come out and he'll release an 8-hour version of Justice League 2 and a 12-hour version of Justice League 3. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm doing this because I grew up reading these comics. I grew up playing these games, watching these shows, being this fan, and I want other people to get to have that experience too. And that won't be something people can do if this company disintegrates in the next decade. If no one wants to join a fandom because it's too toxic and hostile, and if the company goes so bankrupt and is so fiscally sunk that no one even wants to buy the rights to the characters, there's not going to be a Batman, a Superman, or a Wonder Woman, or a Justice League for anyone to grow up loving anymore. And I don't want people to only be nostalgic for things that came out before they were alive. I want them to have new things that speak to their generation and speak to their sensibilities. I think that's important for art to continue to evolve with people and the audience and the times. So I'm doing this because it matters, because someone has to report the truth and no one else seems to. And the people who do report it get covered up, the people who say Justice League star Ray Fisher exposes Warner Brothers, suddenly those keywords are hijacked by Justice League star Jason Momoa to star in Warner Brothers reboot of Frosty the Snowman. Anytime a headline came out that didn't fit, they'd cook up a fake headline to cover it up. A lot of very good journalists who were at the peak of the Me Too movement and other corporate exposés had their work covered up, buried, and the narratives slowly but surely changed behind their back by corporations who wanted to make sure that, okay, well, when our news conglomerate covers this, we downplay that part. And that's what we cover. And this is going to be the least controversial of the books that come out. This one is much more verifiable data. There's not a lot of wiggle room. The next one, art is subjective. We can present you with data. We can present you with factual, issue numbers, quotes from authors, but ultimately it won't force anyone to see art differently. And the third book, there's going to be a lot of people arguing that we falsified things, which is why we went out of our way to provide screenshots and dates and names and explanations so that it is verifiable and unignorable. But the next 2 books are going to be spicy. So if people have a spicy response to this one, I cannot imagine how they're going to handle the next 2, because it only gets hotter from here. Goal is to have these 3 books, the Suicide Squad tabletop game and a Rebel Moon tabletop game, all rolling out one after the other for the next 6 to 8 months, one by one, constantly coming out. The 2 tabletop games will be entirely free. I don't own the rights to that, whereas these other books are journalistic in their nature. All sources, images, they're credited to the parent companies, to the artists who made them. So there's a link to the book down below. The paperback is on its way. If there are other platforms other than Amazon that you want it to be on, let me know in the comments down below. And maybe suggest it to someone who's interested in the topic, or pick it up yourself. You can decide between, getting yourself, you could DoorDash a coffee from Starbucks. You could go to McDonald's and get like a lunch meal. Or you could get a book that will give you tons of information and potentially enlighten you. Whether you like Zack Snyder or hate Zack Snyder or don't even know who he is, this is something that reaches far beyond his fandom and his movies. He made like 2.5 movies at DC. This is an issue that's existed for almost 100 years. If we don't stop it, more people will fall victim to these problems. The fans and the directors. And I'm trying to stop that. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting everything that happens here. And check out the book, read it, even if you disagree with me on things, if you want to critique, the factual reporting, if you take issue with the claims, that's fine. Just read it and have an open mind to the possibility that the 1.5 2 years worth of research and work that was done here by a bunch of very dedicated people who, by the way, do not share the same opinions on the various DC movies. We were not just one fandom. This is just the truth, because we care about DC, we care about the fandom. We want things to get better. So thank you so much for watching. Check the link down below.